Okay.
Well, hello everybody. Welcome back for our second in our series of 5 of fairy tales, folklore, and myth. This morning we're going to be listening from Dr. Gonzalo Himiob. But before we get started, I've got a few things I'd like to mention that's coming up soon in our next in some of our new programming. We've got, of course, series in this to mention. It's Patricia Iyosa is going to be speaking about the dwarfs and Ekeko in fairy tales. Also, at the end of this month in May the 28th, Dr. Conforti is going to start a 4-part series on dreams and dream patterning. And we have with us this morning Eduardo Carvalho. He's going to introduce Dr. Himiob this morning, but Eduardo's got his own lecture coming up on the 19th about Jung's Tower. So those are all things to put on your schedule, and hope we'll see you there. This morning, just a few housekeeping things. If you have trouble with your sound, we've got sound on this side. So if you can't hear well, it's something in your computer if you need to adjust or maybe put in headphones. And we are recording, so you will all receive a clean recording from this morning's presentation. And we're just really excited. We have had about 100 people around the world joining us for this series, and so we're glad that to have a lot of you back. I think that's all I need to mention right now. So I'm going to give it over to Michael and let him take it from here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jennifer. And Jennifer is the Director of Public Programming for the Institute, and she's done such a wonderful job. And again, it's her vision to do this fairy tale seminar, which, as you said, has attracted over 100 people from around the world. So again, thank you, Jennifer, and great work.
A lot of love for fairy tales. Thank you.
See that. This is an incredibly exciting moment for me today for a lot of reasons. One is I've known our speaker for quite a few, probably over 20 years now, Gonzalo. I think we first met when I was in Caracas years ago, and then he trained at the Boston Young Institute. But I'm going to leave his introduction to Eduardo. But my point is to have the opportunity to invite somebody I really care about and really respect tremendously to say, look, would you be part of this community? And very graciously, as Gonzalo and Patricia has accepted, she's going to be speaking in a couple of weeks. It's just such a joy to have people at the table that you want to be with. And this is a type of a great feast for me. And having Eduardo do the introduction. Eduardo is a Jungian analyst, a psychiatrist, medical doctor from Caracas, now practicing and living in Bogota, Colombia, and has emerged as one of the leaders, not only in Latin America, but internationally in the Jungian field. And he's serving as co-director for the CC Institute. He lectures internationally. And if you haven't signed up for his talk on bowling on the tower, I recommend it. I heard some of this years ago. It's a fantastic piece of work, absolutely fantastic, where you really see the power of place and space manifested in matter. So that's coming up in a couple of weeks. So Eduardo, we have a number of people, as I said, from around the world, quite a few Spanish people, Spanish-speaking people. So if you would introduce Gonzalo in both Spanish and English, it'll be a joy for us and a wonderful thing. So I welcome also all of our Latin Americans. There are some Latin Americans now living in the States. Dorisita and other people around the world. Patricia from Peru, originally living in the States. So I welcome all of you to the program and also all of our American community. So Eduardo, welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Michael, for your words, and Jennifer for giving this beautiful opportunity to introduce Gonzalo. I would like to read some lines just to be sure to get to the point. So you cannot imagine the pleasure that I have to introduce you, Gonzalo Himiob. I met Gonzalo around 35 years ago as part of my psychiatric school team. I was starting my studies as psychiatrist, and Gonzalo was one of the teacher's staff. and maybe the first that introduced me into Jung's theories and to Lopez Pedraza's world. Few times in your life you know someone that has either an academic and profound approximation to the mysteries of life and at the same time the most joyful attitude to it. He has been one of the founders of the Venezuelan studies of Jung's theories and the Venezuelan Association for Analytical Psychology, the founder of the Venezuelan Psychotherapists Association, chief of the Psychiatry School of the Central University of Venezuela, and author of many books about myth, fairy tales, and clinical approximation. But talking in an archetypal way, he conjugates both Hermes and Dionysus, what makes him a leader, good friend, amazing teacher, and that kind of people with laissez-faire. Talking about the powers of synchronicities as bridges between the visible and the invisible world, once Gonzalo told me about an experience that he had when he was during his training as Jung analyst in the C.G. Jung Institute in Boston. I quote, "I was walking around on a lazy day and I decided to go into a library of the neighborhood. I wasn't looking for any particular thing, but I had in the back of my mind that I need to find a theme for my final dissertation. Suddenly, out of the blue, a book fell down just in front of me. It was a green, old second-hand book. I picked up and read the title, Guajiro's Stories." I have to say that the Guajira is a region in Venezuela that is where it's indigenous serpent. So the name of the book was Guajiro's Stories, written by a Venezuelan author, an indigenous one. I felt shocked because at that precise moment, I knew that I had to write about my country, my ancestors, and about a psychological field very, very familiar to me. End of quote. I think that at that very moment, Gonzalo started a path as a storyteller and searcher of a truth, which has led him through the work that today he's going to share with us. So, Gonzalo, welcome. I will read it right now in Spanish. No se pueden imaginar el placer de presentarles a Gonzalo Himiob. Conocí a Gonzalo hace unos 35 años como miembro del equipo de la Escuela de Psiquiatría del Hospital Universitario de Caracas. Yo estaba comenzando mis estudios como psiquiatra y Gonzalo era uno de los profesores, quizás el primero, que me introdujo en las teorías de Jung y en el mundo de López Pedraza. Pocas veces en tu vida uno conoce a alguien que tenga una aproximación académica y profunda a los misterios de la vida y al mismo tiempo la actitud más alegre hacia ella. Gonzalo es fundador de los estudios venezolanos de las teorías de Jung y de la Asociación Venezolana de Psicología Analítica, fundador de la Asociación Venezolana de Psicoterapeutas, jefe de la Escuela de Psiquiatría de la Universidad Central de Venezuela y autor de muchos libros sobre mitos, cuentos de hadas y aproximación clínica. Hablando en lenguaje arquetipal, Gonzalo conjuga tanto a Hermes como a Dionisos, lo que lo convierte en un líder, un buen amigo, un maestro increíble y ese tipo de personas con laissez-faire. Hablando sobre el poder de las sincronicidades como puentes entre el mundo visible y el invisible, una vez Gonzalo me contó sobre una experiencia que tuvo cuando estaba entrenándose como analista junguiano en el Instituto C.G. Jung de Boston. Dice Gonzalo, estaba caminando un día sin mucho que hacer y decidí entrar en una librería del vecindario. No estaba buscando nada en particular, pero estaba pendiente de la necesidad de encontrar un tema para mi trabajo final. De repente, de la nada, un libro cayó justo frente a mí. Era un viejo libro verde de segunda mano. Lo recogí y leí el título, Relatos Guajiros, escritos por un autor venezolano indígena. Me sentí conmocionado porque en ese preciso momento supe que tenía que escribir sobre mi país, mis antepasados y sobre un campo psicológico muy, muy familiar para mí. Yo creo que en ese momento Gonzalo comenzó un camino como cuentacuentos y buscador de una verdad particular que lo ha guiado a lo largo del trabajo que hoy voy a compartir y que hoy va a compartir con nosotros. Gonzalo, bienvenido. Welcome, Gonzalo. It's your time.
Something that I need to add to what Eduardo said. When I was walking, it was in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where I found that book. But I had a dream. And in the dream, I was in the top of a hill. And everything around me was stormy. It was a lot of rays and thunders and whatever. And was raining heavily. And it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon in Boston, Massachusetts, which is almost dark night. I was totally upset with Boston. I was angry with the institute. I was angry with everybody. And I said, what I'm doing here? I mean, I could be in Venezuela with the sun out. I was, in the beach, whatever. And then what happened with that book? And that book teaches me that my time was to be there, to do the trip and to come back. That's what it's about, the book that I found. The fairy tale or the folk tale that was over there is called Parusa and Azapanche, and was my first book for my first work for the institute. People like it, and I really enjoyed it. But it was an answer for my problem. In the lecture that I'm going to do, I'm going to make sure that you can see that everything that I have done from my psyche. It's nothing that I have invented. It's nothing that I have produced in an academic work, even though it's academic. But first, it's more like emotional and personal situation. I should begin with this quote of Jung, this Jung quote, that for me is one of the most amazing quotes. Are you seeing well the presentation or not? He said, well, I said, okay. Well, this is a presentation of me that you already know. I did my analytical trumpet my training in Boston, Massachusetts, at the C.G. Jung Institute. The first person that I met over there was Michael Conforti, whom, along with Joe Cambra, John Huell, and Sidney Handel, and some others, became guides and helpers in this process. Don Quixote says to Sancho, es condición del bien nacido saber ser agradecido. It's a condition of the well-raised to be grateful. So thank you, Michael, for your former support and current invitation. I decided to write my graduation thesis at the Jung Institute on Santeria due to my working and living experiences. Let me put this well. The quote that I was talking about, Jung, is the one that follows. Therefore, anyone who wants to know the human psyche will learn next to nothing. I don't know I can put this. From experimental psychology. He will better be advised to abandon the exact science scholar gone, bid farewell to his study and wander with the human heart. There, in the horrors of prisons, lunatic asylums, and hospitals, in drab suburban brothels and gambling hells, in the salons of the elegant, the stock exchange meeting, churches, revitalist gathering, and ecstatic set, through love and experience the passion on every form of in his body, he will reach knowledge more deep than the textbooks of one would seek will give him. He will know now how to heal the human soul by really knowing about the human soul. For me, this quote, I don't know why I have this thing over here. I should put it some other. Okay, that's better. Were you able to hear the? I became interested in the story and explore of Santeria within the Latin American culture. Experience because I had an experience in a health center, which was very, very interesting and very difficult for me. In this center, there was this is a first anecdote. The most stolen book in the center was the DSM-3, which was and the statistics manual for psychiatry. And nobody knew why that was happening. And I said to the supervisor, you don't know what's happening here, why people are stealing this book, you're not in the right place to be. You have to understand what is happening with the Latino American picaresque. They needed to know what to say in order to keep the benefits of the welfare. And then after that, I realized that the lot of misunderstanding that was around all the Latin American people in Boston. And so I began to ask myself, where does the low and middle class in the USA go for therapy? The richer will go to analysts. The poorest will go just to places where they can find help in a very free way, but they are in a very difficult situation to keep going on with the therapy. And the therapy will be just for 20 sessions or so. So I said, where do these people go? And then I realized there was some African temples around. There were around 50 temples for Santeria at that time, just in Boston. Not to talk about Candomblé, Paleria, Umbanda, and other African American cults. Fundamentalist religions were other source for them to experience, to experience and to work through their some understanding, because the Protestants and the Calvinists and all those monotheistic cults, they really offer some kind of containers for the Latin American psyche over there. So I went to Andover Newton Theological School and did some experience over there. Well, the first experience that I was supposed to be the supervisor for the pastors and ministers that provide psychotherapy for people in very difficult conditions. What I said, well, I can supervise it. The first meeting were about 50 people came to the meeting. The second one, I found out there was around 20 people. The third one, only 3 or 4, and the fourth one, nobody went. So I said, what's happening here? But at the same time, that the people on supervision were not going there, they began, my private practice began to grow. And began to grow geometrically in a very amazing way. That forces me to make what Michael showed me once, that you have a door to enter and a door to go out. Because sometimes, when 2 minutes, they always say names that nobody can recognize. So they can say, look, I'm Gonzalo, I'm going to go there. And he really was Eduardo, and he was a minister. But if 2 ministers get together and find themselves in my office, they will feel themselves amazed, threatened. But so my practice grew geometrically at that moment with all those guys that work, leaving the supervision group. Then I began to figure out that it was an important thing to visit. Andover Newton was a very good place to go to the Latin American, African American cults. And then Babalao, Babalao is a priest of Santeria. And he was very depreciative with the Spanish culture. And I became very angry with him. And I asked him if he knew about López de Vega or if he knew about Cervantes. He didn't know anything about that. So I say, well, this guy, how can be talking about the Spanish culture? He doesn't know anything about it. He really doesn't know what the Spanish culture is all about. And So I was angry, and I came out of my anger to begin my exploration on African American culture. And I realized what really means to be a Latino. But many people think that Latino are Latin Americans. And I always say the Latino comes from the Latin. And Latin was the most called language in the Middle Age and Modern Age. And almost 50% of the English language has a Latino roots. So when you talk about Latino, you're talking about Italians, you're talking about Latin Americans, you're talking about Mexicans, about Cubans, about Romanis, about French. It's a huge amount of people when you say Latino. So it's a misunderstanding that say the Latino are only Latin Americans. Latin America is everyone who was governed by the Roman Empire at times. So, and beside of that, 50%, beside of that, the United States is the third Spanish-speaking country in the world. First is Colombia, secondly is Spain, and first is Mexico, Colombia, and third is the United States, even over Spain. So when you talk about Latino, you have to take into account all those experiences. And we have a very rich culture. I mean, the Latino population has a real far story of an understanding of what's going on. Santeria means the way of the saints. This is some experience of the Latino people. You have Lope de Vega, you have Cervantes, you have Gabriel García Márquez, you have Quevedo, you have Luis Buñuel, you have Dalí and García Lorca, you have Picasso. It's so rich. Our culture is so rich that it's really very sad that people don't appreciate that way our culture. This presentation will have several objectives. The primary objectives build up some reflections on Santeria or the dark divinities in Latin America as archetypal patterns. I should say something here. At least in Venezuela, in many places, people confuse, and Jung talk about that, confuse what is an archetypal image and what is an archetype. An archetypal image is the way the archetypes show themselves in different cultures. For example, it's a big error to say this is the archetype of Aphrodite, or this is the archetype of Dionysius, or this is Hermes' archetype. No, Hermes, Aphrodite, and all the Greek gods are just archetypal images. What is behind that is the forces of the psyche, or the energies of the psyche that tries to express themselves in every culture. So that's what Michael should say, call the archetypal patterns. The archetypal patterns is the way the archetypes show themselves, but the archetypes are pure energy. You cannot see them until they can go through the structure or a physical structure or imaginary structure. The secondary objective will be to explore the concept of archetypal patterns, who I already said, reflect on mythology as a creative, a survival function. The psyche is mythical. The psyche is creative. And for me, the creativity and mythological patterns of the psyche are an instinct. We are done to create images, to make poetry of our own beings. Then we should consider the influence of culture in the archetypal patterns. I've already said there's no way that you can do, there's no way that you can build up an image of an archetype without being in touch with the culture where that archetype is going to unfold. and then also reflect on the history of African slavery. The conquer of and colonization of America were done by the Catholic majesties. The Catholic Queen says one that none of my citizens are slaves. That means that she didn't realize, she didn't understand, she couldn't integrate the slavery with her citizens. Latin American natives, I mean what we call Latin American Indians, were Spanish citizens. In such, they were not slaves. They were unable to be slaves. Beside of that, and their souls needed to be saved. The Africans at that moment on the history did not have souls. They were not Spaniards, and according to the Catholic Church at that moment, they didn't have souls. They didn't have anything to save. But beside of that, and more in economical way, they were needed in the sugar plantation. Sugar plantations were huge, were enormous, were very, very big. And what happened with with the plantation was, well, was the oil of the time. And the owners of the sugar plantation were called the king sugar. They have slaves, they have a lot of people, and the Amerindians were impossible to be taken as slaves because of what I said on regard to the Catholic Queen. Cristóbal Colón and Fray Bartolomé Las Casas, Bartolomé Las Casas was called the Apostle of the Indians. Is considered almost a saint. For me, was a slaver. I mean, he just brought people from Africa. He promote the African traffickants. They promote what I would call the middle passage. They will commerce with the African people, and no, but he's almost a saint for the Catholic Church, and he was a saint because he didn't consider the Africans to have soul, so they were able to be hunted or to be treated as animals or whatever. Since they didn't have soul, they don't do anything for them. So he began to do this. But beside of that, when Colón came to this beautiful beach that you see down here, it's called Macuro, which is the most eastern town in Venezuela. It was the first place where Colón came. And he saw that place and he said, I believe that I come to paradise. Because of the weather, because of the Indians, because of the fertility of the whole country, he saw that he thought at that moment that he has come to paradise. And he found over there a lot of African people. When we talk about African people, we think them about one race, and it's totally unfair. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of races, there's a lot of cultures in the African country. And the African inhabitants share different positions. They have many cultures, they have many tribes. And once they were taken as slaves to Latin America, they called each other Lucumí, just because they had a dark skin. That doesn't mean that they have the same culture. It was just they shared the color of the skin, and calling each other Lucumí meant my friend. It means my friend is you belong to the same race that I belong. We have the same color, even though we have different culture, we have the same color of the skin. One of the most developed races and cultures in Africa was the Yorubas. The Yorubas, we come to Nigeria, and they were very, very cultivated, very, very high developed, and they were not very aggressive. That meant to them some kind of weakness, because the other tribes trying to get out from the traffickants to the slavers, traffickants, just went to the towns and just picked them up and helped the Portuguese, the Spaniards, and the Hollands to pick up all these guys who were not very aggressive and were able to be more dominated. Is that clear? So a lot of people came and they took them. I'm sorry, I can't show this because this is a patera. You know what a patera is? It's some kind of very humble boat that is now getting into Europe from Africa. So what happened at that moment is happening now. A lot of people are taking people into America or into Europe just to take them to trade with them. And the pateras are just like you can see over here. This small boat with a lot of people inside. A lot of people die trying to get into some homeland where they can find a better place to live. But that happened also at that moment when in what was called the Middle Passage. The Middle Passage meant that people who were being taken to America to work as slaves, from 50% of the people died during the trip. Even they died because they become ill, even they died because they were thrown into the sea, even they died because they fought in between them. The caravels or the ships where they used to go were very, very small and very uncomfortable, and people die very often. They call it middle passage because only the middle 50% of the population that traveled were able to get there alive. Santeria means the path of the saints, the way of the saints. What happened with Santeria was that all these African people began to share same kind of religions that was called the Orishas. The Orishas are the saints of Santeria, and what the Orishas are is just of ways in which the archetypes show themselves. Well, there was a lot of Orishas going there. Surprisingly, for many people, Santeria is a monotheistic religion. It's one God called Olodumare, who has different paths in his way, and he is also a trilogy of forces. Olodumare, which is a creative God, Olosi, who happens to be God in this earth, and Babakwa, who is the God that goes to build other, to influence or to take this religion into another worlds, even another planets. But what the Orishas are is just a way of showing, is just archetypal images transformed into the ways the Yoruba were able to see those forces. But when they got into America, they begin to honor their saints. But their saints were persecuted by the Catholic Church. So what happened was the Yoruba begin, or the Africans begin to synchronize or disguise, better to say disguise, their gods or these archetypal forms into the Catholic saints. Is that clear? So they begin to take the names of the Catholic saints and disguise with those names their Orishas. And they perform a lot of rituals over there. A lot of rituals that were able to create and to form this. Let me back a little bit. What happened with me with Bat Babalao, that I thought it was a very, very uncultivated person, and very person that was more interested in, seduce the American population with his works. Right? And I said, well, and I begin to realize that there was a very rich pantheon of archetypes in the Orishas religion. So I decided to go to Santeria. There was a lot of other things to go, but I said, I have to focus. And I have to focus and keep my focus in this Santeria. So I was invited by a Santero over there called Steve Quintana, who was a very strange guy. He was a very dark guy, strong, good, handsome, good person, very intelligent. And he was also the president of the Lions Club. So he once invited me to a gathering, and I thought there was a gathering of Santeria, and I was in the middle of the Lions Club. So it was interesting. He had a lot of. So these are the way of the saint, images of the saints. They were, for example, Shango, Olodumare is the main god. Obatala is the Virgin of Mercies. Shango is Santa Barbara. Oshun is the Virgin of Copper. Oya is the Virgin of the Candelaria or Candle Virgin. Ogun is Saint Joseph. Elegua is the Saint Child of Atocha. Elegua is the Hermes from Santeria. Babaluayo is Saint Lazarus, which happens to be the archetype of the sick. Orumila is Saint Francis of Assisi, Michael. So Saint Francis of Assisi, who happens to be the divination Orisha for excellence. Yemaya is a version of the sea and is the version of Regla, who happens to be one of the patrons of Brazil and one of the patrons of Cuba. Actually, for Yemaya, there's a lot of rituals, and every New Year's Eve in the beaches of Brazil, you will see all the beaches covered with small candles and white flowers. They are honored to the Yemaya. When I was a very, very little boy, I have an African person who took care of us. I mean, all my uncles, my aunts, my brothers, and my cousins, and she was called Maria Pacheco. And Maria Pacheco, what happened was that every time a child was delivered, she took the how do you call it, el cordón umbilical, the umbilical cord, to the sea and throw it into the sea. And I said, why is she doing that? And then I realized that that was a Yemaya's ritual for the kid to be healthy, for the kid to be wealthy, to perform a nice life. In Santeria, they honor the ancestors, and the ancestors are kept in some kind of cauldrons. Those cauldrons are nourished by something that's called the Himiob. The Himiob is something that I don't know what it is really about, but it's a mixture of blood with liquor and with different herbs, and they will be put into the cauldron, and the cauldron will be filled with stones. The stones are very important for Santeria because it's supposed that when somebody dies, he will go up to the sky and be transformed into a cloud. And once transformed into a cloud, he will come back in the way of a rain, and he will fill the rivers, and in the rivers they will be crystallized in a form of a rock. So when one Santero wants to go and see where are his ancestors, often he goes to the river, and then one particular stone will speak to him. And that particular stone belongs to his ancestors. So his ancestor will be there and will be with him, and he will take it to the caverns and will be keeping, nourishing him with this Himiob, which I don't know exactly what it's all about because that's a mystery that I didn't want. Steve Quintana wanted me to become a Santero. Let me tell you that. He wanted me to become son of Obatala. Obatala is one of the most important saints in Santeria. He's a white saint. And he said that since I had this beard that was beginning, at that moment was beginning to be white, now it's totally white, but at that moment was beginning to be white. And he said, I think you are a son of Obatala. You have to go to Obatala. And I told him, no, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be a Santero. I want to be a Jungian. And as a Jungian, I would like to explore and to have one foot in and one foot out. If I transform myself into a Santero, I will be prejudiced. And I won't be able to do an exploration, at least free of prejudices. So I decided, no, I don't want to be a Santero. I want to study Santeria, but not to be a Santero. These are the stones. You see over here are the stones, different kinds, different types. And over here are the stones and in the Ongero. These are some of the orishas. This is the Virgen de Candelaria, which is Oya. This is Oba, who is a very important orisha. This is something that I will talk about later. This is Ogun. Ogun is the ironsmith. No, sorry, this is Shango. Shango is the warrior. Is Ares. Is Martes. Is the enemy of this other one over here that is called Ogun. Ogun is the ironsmith, and they are brothers, but they fight constantly together. They against each other, and the reason they fight about was because Ogun first did something. The first transgression of Ogun was that he violated his mother, who was called Odua, who was the wife of Obatala. And Shango was also hijo of Odua and Obatala, and fought with him, and always he always gained all the battles between them. But one of the things that happened was that because of this violation, Odua was very angry and Obatala was very angry, so he asked for forgiveness and they forgave him. And then when he did something very, very tricky, and he took Oya, who happens to be the Virgin of Candles, as his wife. But Oya was Shango's girlfriend. So he took his wife away and married Ogun, which really collaborated to more anger between them. Shango was, to be compensed by that, Shango was marry Oba. And Oba was a very, very nice person. Very, what we should say right now, was a very submissive person. And she did it, and she tolerated everything. She was very innocent, very naive. So she married, very in love with Shango. And Shango didn't like her very much. But they had those kind of difficult marriage where she was like, I don't know, the woman that tolerates everything. She was very passive, and she was a very good wife and very good housekeeper and whatever. But who really Shango loved, am I making sense or? What Shango really loved was Oya, but Oya was already married with. And Oshun, who happens to be this little girl here with a yellow clothes, was Aphrodite for the Santeria. Was the youngest of all the orishas, and was a very, very seductive person. So I'm going to tell a particular Pataki. Pataki are the legends of Santeria. Santeria is also a divination cult. For divination, they use three main things: the seashells, the coconuts, and Oromila scholar. Oromila scholars are very sophisticated, and they don't use it very much. Only Oromila is allowed to do that, and only the sons of Oromila and sons and daughters of Oromila are the ones who do that. Oromila is also the saint for health. So every sick person that goes to a santero and needs to be cured, it will have some kind of collar made of green and yellow that are the colors of Orumila. Every saint has their own colors. One of the things that happens when you are initiating in Santeria, first you make saint, and then a lot of colors come into your neck or to your body. One of the main things that happened with Santeria and is very criticized is the sacrifices, the animal sacrifices. Let me tell you that animal sacrifices goes long way into the old religions. Even the Jews and the Catholic religions were sometimes done through animal sacrifices. That's what happened with the Jews when they go to the temple and they sacrifice different kind of animal, doves or sheep or whatever. It also happened in the Catholic tradition. The main sacrifice was the sacrifice of Christ. But so people very often criticize Santeria because of the sacrifice of animals. I don't agree with that, but also I understand. And sacrifice, what really means is to make sacred, to make sacred. If you do a sacrifice, because you're trying to do something sacred. And as also said before, it's a monotheistic religion. So the Babalaos usually do more often the seashells, less the coconuts and more or less the Orumillas. This is the beautiful Mother of the Sea, Yemaya, that I already talked about. This is a beach in Brazil with all those candles and white flowers going there. I once in Boston, I had a friend that was a Brazilian woman. Mary was a Bostonian, and they both invited us to a ceremony on New Year's Eve. My wife and I went. We were surprised when they began to give us white flowers, and we throw it into the seas in Boston. The Patakins and amplification. Patakins are the legends of Santeria. And more than any other thing, they serve as way of amplifications for the understanding of the psyche and the forces within the psyche. The Patakin of Ogun, Oba, and Chango. The Patakin of Oba is that Oba was so in love with Shango that she did everything that she wanted, but Shango didn't like her. Whom he liked more was Oya. So, and it was kind of triangulation over there. Ogun loved Oshun and was the husband of Oya. Oya loved Shango, and Shango was married with Oba. And Oshun was the Aphrodite of the whole situation. I mean, all the erotic things that were there. And she wanted to have Shango as her lover. So once Oba, who was very innocent and very naive, went to Oshun to ask for help. And she can tell her how she can be able to seduce Shango. The more naivety that cannot happen, because she was, the other one was in love, wanted to Shango as lover. So when she came there and she said, well, you just cut up your ears and give it to him in a soup. So Oba did that. And when Shango realized what happened, he really depreciated and rejected her. And he was horrified with that. So And then he said, well, okay, Oba, I know you did it for love. I don't love you. And after this, I cannot love you anymore. So yes, I will keep you always with me because you are my wife and I will respect you, but I'm not going to sleep anymore with you. I'm just going to do my life. The other thing that happened was, well, as I said, Oya and Shango were in love. But some tricky situation, Ogun interfered and make her father, his father, Obatala, force Oya to marry him. So what happened was that Shango and Oya became lovers. And Ogun learned about it. And when he learned about it, he went into the forest. And of course, he was the artisan, he was the ironsmith, he was the worker, the guy who made industries and things there. So what happened was that when he went into the forest, all civilization went down. And in poor, nothing was flourishing. So the Orisha, who are very angry about it and very concerned, so they decided to try to bring Ogun back so civilization can prosper. So what happened was that he didn't pay any attention to none of them. But then came out Oshun, and she said, I'm going to take him out of the forest. Since she was the youngest, nobody paid too much attention to her. So, but what she did is she dressed his yellow dresses, and she began to dance in the forest. She came with a pumpkin full of honey. With this pumpkin full of honey, she began to dance and dance and dance. And then Ogun finally saw her, and through her dresses, he was able to see her body and began fascinated and seduced by these erotic dances and there. And what happened was that she once, then in a certain moment, look at this, he put his fingers into the pumpkin, put honey into her fingers, and put the honey on Ogun's upper lip, and so he smelled her odor. And once he found that he was unable to stay in the forest, so he went out following Oshun's body. Nothing happens about that. Once a patient of mine came to my office and said, the last night I have met the most beautiful woman I ever met. She was dancing all around, dancing and dancing, and I knew that she was dancing for me. And this was a very seductive and hysterical woman, I believe. And so she was just seducing everybody and dancing, and showing her body and doing this and that. So what happened is that he decided that she was in love with him, and that she was dancing just for him. So he began to persecute her. Every place where she goes, he was over there. Every place where she was going, she was always, persecuting her. And she was totally enraged with this guy. So once he came to me and tell me this story, and she didn't understand, I told him the patakin about Ogun's honey. And he stopped like that and said, oh wow, that's what's happening with me. I am seduced by her sexiest presence, by her honey, by the smell of her skin, and really she doesn't love me. It's only a process of my own projections. So that's a way I think that patakins in Latin American culture can help to do some kind of amplifications. And I think that's all. I would like to hear you. and see if we can talk a little bit more.
Thank you, Gonzalo. That was really wonderful. If I didn't say earlier, but if you have questions, please use the chat box because we're all muted. And I don't know if Eduardo, you want to, perhaps if you want to write in Spanish, if you're more comfortable in that language, Eduardo can help us with translating. I don't know if there's anything, Michael, you want to say or.
Yeah, I've got a question. Number one, fabulous. I mean, this is what you did feels like the beauty of the old Jungian work, Gonzalo, where we take an archetype and really talk about it and explore it. And obviously, you've been in that world for quite a while, understanding the world of Santeria. What would you say is the dominant archetypal issue in that religion? The dominant theme, where we say many religions, from the Judaism to Catholicism, they each bring a particular piece of the self into the world, or articulated piece of the self. What would you say Santeria does?
I don't know if I got the question. I understand.
Eduardo, can you maybe translate?
Lo que, fíjate, para Michael, lo que él llama dominio, el dominante, es como lo que marca, es el core de la energía que está presente. Entonces la pregunta es que si tú consideras que la santería tiene una especie de elemento dominante que la identifica. Okay.
Sí, sí, eso es lo que había entendido, pero no entendía si él me estaba preguntando. I didn't understand that if you were asking about a dominant archetype in Santeria.
Yes, yes.
No, I don't think there's no dominant archetype. All the archetypes are equally powerful. But what really happened was the Santeria was built on a tragedy. And the tragedy was the slavery. And from my point of view, the archetypal patterns are always there to help people to overcome their sufferings. And I think that Santeria was a religious force that allowed these African people so wounded and so scared to survive in a difficult condition. Santeria had also one another thing that for me is very important, is that the masters and the slaves, since the plantations were outside the cities, and to the plantation went the masters and the slaves. Wives didn't go to the plantation. So they were forced to interact, masters and slaves, that facilitated a world of syncretism or interaction. So the main forces in Santeria that I can imagine is first the wounded person, that were able to heal through the archetypal patterns, and the other side, the other forces that came about was the interaction of two different races or two different social levels. I mean, the masters and the slaves, the criollos, who were the Spanish or the Spaniards born in Latin America, and the slaves. Beside of that, once a woman in that, the wife of any of those masters delivered the baby, what happened was that it was taken by a nodriza, by a housekeeper, mostly black people who were slaves and became, the keepers of the person that took care of the kids. That will create a very strong attachment between sons, I mean, between the children and the housekeepers. Do I answer your question?
Thank you very much.
So I don't think that there's a particular archetype. The archetype, the dominant archetype that I think will be the capacity to interact and the wounded persons, the archetype of the wounded.
Yeah.
There it is. It's if you want to go over a little bit,
Yeah,
Gonzalo.
I think so. Eduardo,
There's-
maybe you want to translate the questions. You can
Yeah,
see them
there's
on
some
the list
questions.
here. Yeah, it's okay. Jennifer, go over a little bit.
Let's see. I've got several questions that keep coming in. One question is, someone wants to hear more about, is it Oha, the great Orisha of the hurricane and the
Oba?
storm? Yeah,
No, not that I
about
can.
the great Orisha of hurricanes and storms. Wanted to know a
Oh,
little bit more about that.
No, that belongs more to Santa Barbara. Santa Barbara is Shango. Shango, who is a warrior, but it's also the Orisha of the storms and hurricanes and war, all of those things. Who's Ogun's enemy?
Okay. There's another question. Someone wanted to know if there was a particular reason that you named these religions as African American cults.
Well, I'm not saying that cults, I'm not diminishing the word cult. For me, cult is to merge culture. Culture comes from cult. It's a way of seeing things, of acting things, and the religions have their own cults. I mean, the mass cult, all the cults that comes with the religion. They create some kind of patterns of behavior that became are transformed into culture.
Thank you. There's another question. It says, is there a theme of possessing, owning, or occupation of both that Patakan and the cultural physical takeover? Does that make sense? Theme of possessing, owning, or occupation in both that Patakan, Patakin, and the cultural physical takeover.
Well, I don't know if I clearly understand the question, but
I don't either. Jennifer, maybe if you
I'm
could ask
not
Louis.
sure either. Yeah,
Maybe you could
Louis.
ask Louis to speak up. Maybe Sylvia, can you unfreeze Louis so he could ask the question directly?
My question, thank you. My question had to do is there a parallel within the story that also represents what happened historically to the people of those places, that in the story that he mentions, he's taken over by this personality that comes and dances seductively for him, and he kind of loses himself in her, loses his own identity, his own purpose, and falls into her trap, so to speak. And some that this idea of falling in love or making a almost like you're under some type of trance.
Possession.
oh yeah, trance is
And
very
so but
Hope-
is there an enslavement that took place there,
That's interesting.
like the actual enslavement that took place?
Yeah, no, there. It takes place everywhere in the dancing and the rituals of Santeria are called bembe. And bembe are places where they dance, they play drums called bata, and those drums will provide the descendant of a particular orisha. Depending whose orisha is descending, you will be dancing, or you will be fighting, or you will be doing any other kind of thing. And depending on whose son are you, or whose children are you. If you are a son of let's say of a boom, you probably become fighter. If you are a son of a Shun, you might dance seductively, fascinate people, but you get possessed, and bodily possessed, and behavioral possessed. by the presence of Santeria, which is one of the things that is sometimes can be a little bit scary if you don't have an ego enough with enough strength to support that. One of the main surprises that I got when I went to the Bembes with Steve Quintana was that most of the people over there were white, American white people.
Well, there's a question from Deborah. This may be related. She wants to, if you could speak about the practice such as Umbanda, where one invites a guiding spirit into your being.
Oh yeah, Umbanda is another African American religion. It's more soft and more comprehensive than Santeria. Umbandas are more white, more light, but I don't feel that I have the capacity to talk about it.
Okay, but there's still you do in Santeria invite spirits live in your body. They possess, are they always in your body, in your head mostly?
Well, supposedly they are. You have one particular spirit that you become his children, his son or her daughter or his daughter, whatever. And you can be a man and be possessed by Oshun, or you can be a woman and be possessed by Shango or by Ogun. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But you
And
have
that happens at birth, correct? Is that what at birth a child is possessed from birth by the spirit? Or?
I don't know. I cannot
don't know.
say that. I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question because I don't know if that happens at birth or is something that you will
Happens later.
acquire.
You know, Gonzalo, I think part of the question is, are there ways to create an intentional alignment to a particular archetype, to a particular deity? I think that's part of where this question is coming from, which is really important. So is that part of what they're doing in their ritual, trying to create that access to a particular facet of spirit?
Well, that's the same that happens with everything. What is this thing at birth or was acquired? It belongs to nature or belongs to culture? Belongs to nature or belongs to nurture or to culture? It's three things. Birth, nature is what comes with you. Nurture is what you got from your parents or your family, whatever. And culture is what you got from your environment. So those three things can mix a bit in yourself and be flavor any kind of happening. But well, I don't know. I can't answer that question. Neither I don't think anybody can do. Probably a person who has very much involved in Santeria can say, well, this boy or this girl was born as a son of Ogun, and this other was, but it's something that I can't tell. What is common to every one of them is the need for archetypal happenings. And that will give them, that will give us, I mean, not only them, us, everybody of us, give us some sense of some religious sense, which is an archetypal sense or a mythical sense to unfold.
Like that mythological sense you said at the beginning of creative and survival functions that archetypes bring in.
Yes.
The healing and survival.
There's three things. The capacity for the psyche to do poetry, which is the creative part of the psyche. Once I create these images or these poetry or poems or whatever, I have to translate it into some other part to communicate with somebody else about that. And that's what I create metaphors. Metaphors are the way of interacting between two poetries or two creative minds. Does that make sense?
beautiful. It's a beautiful way of framing it. Well, Jennifer, maybe on this note we'll stop. And Gonzalo, it's a gift you've given our community today. It's a beautiful gift, and helping us see.
So many times without so long time without speaking English that I got confused so often.
No, the English is great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Did
Eduardo,
beautifully.
any comments you want to make in closing?
And for me, it was a beautiful presentation and also a very important moment to share with Gonzalo, and to have Gonzalo and also you together, because I think the last time was in Caracas many, many years ago. So it was an amazing time. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a sacred time. Jennifer, thank you. Gonzalo, for the gifts, and all of you for being part
Thank
of it.
you for listening.
Thank you, Gonzalo, and the best to you and your family.
Hope you
Thank
make it home soon.
Yeah, hope you get home.
Well, I hope that
Wonderful.
sometimes I will get home. I'm already 3 months here. I don't know when I'm gonna go. I have a last thing to say. One of the worst things that happens to me, I was educated as a medical doctor here in Spain. So I love Spain, I love Madrid, I love the food, I love the wine, I love to go out. And one of the main problems that I have here is being confined, not being able to go to the bars or the restaurants or just to walk around the city.
Well, I hope you get out soon.
Yeah, I hope so. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Jennifer.
you